Hello, how are you? Welcome to the CurioClips channel. Life on our planet is full of wonder. We've got gigantic sequoia trees that live for thousands of years, microscopic bacteria that can survive in extreme conditions, birds that can fly up to 60 miles per hour, and amoebas that are so shapeless they aren't even technically alive. But for all this life's diversity, every living thing on Earth shares one very important thing in common. All of them are made of cells. The cell is the most basic unit of life that we know of. It's the smallest thing that can be considered truly alive. And yet scientists still don't know exactly how these incredible structures first arose from non-living matter. What we do know is that it happened somewhere between 4 and 3.5 billion years ago. That's not a lot of time to explain something as complicated as life. But over the past few decades, researchers have put together a pretty good idea of how it may have happened. And their answers might surprise you. We'll tell you about the building blocks of life, RNA and protein, in a minute. First, let's talk about the environment. As far back as we can see, the early Earth was a hot, stormy place with an atmosphere rich in nitrogen and carbon dioxide, methane and ammonia and water vapor. There were also huge volcanic eruptions and lots of ultraviolet radiation bombarding the surface from the sun. So how did the first cells arise from such a chaotic jumble? Well, scientists think the key was deep down under the waves. Researchers have suggested that the first cells formed in shallow pools of water on the surface of the Earth. In fact, experiments attempting to recreate the conditions of early Earth have found that the first step towards life might be getting water onto land. The problem was that once the water evaporated, any molecules that were left behind were quickly destroyed by UV radiation from the sun. But scientists have found that if you add some clay minerals to the mix, things get a whole lot different. Clay particles act like little magnets, attracting organic molecules out of the air and holding on to them even after the water evaporates. One study published in 2021 showed that when exposed to the right kind of clay, amino acids and other organic molecules could stick around for at least 7 million years. That's long enough for more complex molecules like proteins to start assembling from those amino acids. Proteins, in turn, could then go on to form membranes which can act as the boundary between a cell and its environment, protecting the cell's insides from the harsh world outside. Okay, so we're on the right track. Organic molecules can assemble into larger biological molecules like proteins and lipids, which can form membranes. But there's a big missing piece. Scientists don't think that proteins alone could have jump-started life on Earth. They also needed some sort of helper molecule that could carry genetic information from one generation to the next. Enter RNA. RNA is closely related to DNA, the molecule that holds the genetic instructions for life in almost all living things today. But unlike DNA, which is double-stranded, RNA is single-stranded. This makes RNA much more flexible, which allows it to take on a wider variety of shapes and perform a bunch of different functions within a cell. But RNA is a bit of a mystery when it comes to understanding how life began. Scientists haven't been able to figure out whether RNA came before DNA or vice versa. One clue we have is that the machinery responsible for copying both types of genetic material into simpler forms for use outside the nucleus of a cell seems to use both RNA and protein. So it would make sense that these two molecules came into being around the same time. But what's more likely? That RNA came first and somehow sparked life, or that it was a product of life that had already begun? Well, as it turns out, scientists think that both could be true. Some researchers hypothesize that RNA wasn't the primary genetic material, but instead played a critical role in jump-starting life. In this scenario, another type of molecule called PNA may have been the primary genetic material. Like RNA, PNA is single-stranded, but it's even more flexible and can fold in on itself. And because it's made of a different assortment of molecules than RNA, it's more resistant to being broken down by UV radiation. These characteristics make it more suitable for life on the early Earth, but it's also thought to be less stable than RNA, meaning it wouldn't last very long. So here's where RNA comes in. RNA could have served as an enzyme, catalyzing the formation of PNA and kicking off the process of life. Once PNA was formed, it could take over as the main genetic material, and RNA could return to its supporting role. But wait, we said that RNA might have come after PNA. How can that be? Well, the answer lies in the amazing adaptability of RNA. When scientists looked at fossils of ancient bacteria, they noticed that the genes responsible for making RNA polymerases, the enzymes that synthesize RNA from DNA, were much older than the genes responsible for making DNA polymerases, the enzymes that synthesize DNA. From this, researchers concluded that the genes for RNA polymerases must have arrived via a virus, meaning RNA had to evolve before the cells that contain DNA evolved. So perhaps RNA and PNA coexisted and RNA came first in terms of function, meaning RNA could have catalyzed the formation of PNA, helping life get a foothold on the early Earth. Okay, so we've got molecules forming on positively charged clay, assembling into the major components of a cell, RNA, and protein. Now we just need to figure out how those cellular components move into the cell and then replicate. Scientists think these processes may have occurred thanks to some sort of membrane-bound compartment. In order for a cell to work properly, all of its parts have to stay in one place. Without walls or barriers of some kind, everything would just float away. So it makes sense that one of the things that came together inside those early cells was a way to hold everything in. But what kind of barrier could life's earliest cells have used? Well, we've got a surprising answer to thank for that. The oldest evidence of life on Earth is preserved in rocks about 3.7 billion years old. These rocks contain structures that look strikingly similar to bacterial cells dividing. But it gets weirder. Those fossil cells seem to divide by a process called budding, where a small piece pinches off of a larger cell and grows into a new cell. And budding isn't just found in bacteria. It's also used by single-celled eukaryotes, organisms whose cells have a nucleus, and other membrane-bound organelles. This means that budding may have been an early strategy for asexual reproduction that eventually gave way to binary fission, the more common method of cell division used by prokaryotes, organisms without a nucleus. If so, budding may have been a critical adaptation that allowed early cells to keep all their parts inside, since the budding cell hangs on to the rest of the parent cell until it's ready to break off. That means that in addition to forming the outer boundary of a cell, the budding process itself could have helped cells enclose their contents. It's possible that these early cells used lipid membranes as their enclosure, since lipids spontaneously form closed compartments when placed in a watery environment. Clay minerals could have provided the energy to form these compartments, which could have eventually become cell membranes once the clay was washed away. Then, when the time came for the buds to pinch off, special proteins could have ripped the cells open, allowing the contents to spill out and creating new cells. With a mechanism for reproduction, all that was left for early life was to figure out how to get food. Scientists think life's earliest cells were autotrophs, meaning they made their own food. Just like plants today, early autotrophs probably carried out photosynthesis. But what was the source of their energy? For years, scientists have debated whether life on Earth began with photosynthesis powered by sunlight or by chemicals. Since the origin of photosynthesis is hard to study directly, researchers have tried to draw conclusions from the diversity of photosynthetic life that exists today. Organisms like plants and algae use water as an electron donor, which means they need sunlight, while others, like the green sulfur bacteria, use hydrogen sulfide. This suggests that photosynthesis could have originated from a common ancestor that used hydrogen sulfide as its electron donor. But recent discoveries are challenging this view. In 2022, researchers reported finding fossils of microbes that leave telltale signs of oxygen production, suggesting they used water as an electron donor. If so, these organisms would have lived much earlier than 3.43 billion years ago, since the oxygen they produced would have reacted with iron to form rocks that are at least 3.7 billion years old. The presence of these early oxygen-producing organisms means that life on Earth likely began with photosynthesis driven by both chemical and light energy. Okay, so now we've got all the pieces that could have led to the first cells. But how does that explain the incredible variety of life we see on Earth today? Well, the answer is evolution. Once life began, mutations and variations between cells caused some to thrive while others died out. Over millions of years, those variations added up, giving rise to the diversity of life on Earth today. And because it only takes a few changes in the genetic code to turn one kind of cell into another, scientists think all life on Earth may have originated from a single common ancestor. By studying fossils, comparing the genetics of living organisms, and modeling the chemistry of the early Earth, scientists will continue to piece together the story of life's origins. It might never be possible to know for sure how life began, but there's still a lot to discover about the events that kicked it all off. You'll have to wait until next week to find out about a strange creature that may hold the key to life on Earth. And thanks for watching.